the effort to reform the system is because they know that no matter what is thrown at them by the people throwing it at them, they're going to overcome it. And so the innovation of staff versus members is one that becomes immediately apparent to you when you're a lobbyist or when you're working with Congress. The truth is, congressmen used to have no staff. Daniel Webster had no staff. The great minds of our past, the great leaders of our past, wrote their own bills, wrote their own correspondence, did all their own meetings, seemed to somehow find time for it. Now, since the federal government is involved in so much and in so many areas of our lives, they have large staffs. And like corporations and like other places, the staff runs the show. And so that becomes apparent to a lobbyist immediately. The ones who are going to make the decision are going to give you the access to the staff. So the other thing that you figure
It's
out
11:30.
is that most members of Congress are pretty lazy. They don't want to do the work. They run for office. They love the camera. They love the hot, when the big lights go on. They want to be on TV. They want to raise money, and they want to win their elections, but they don't want to do any work. They certainly don't want to read the bills. That for certain. They don't want it. They can't understand why. Yeah. Busy reading comic books, so they don't have time for the bills. But they're not really running the trains. The staff is. So when the time came that I started hiring, as I started building my lobbying practice, most people would try to hire congressmen because of the marquee value of the name and things like that. I had a totally different tack. I would never hire a congressman. I hired one congressman. I was actually asked by the leadership to hire a nice guy, a bit of a dolt who couldn't get a job, and I hired him. But he turned out to be utterly worthless to us. I always hired staff because the staff were hungry and they were killers, and that's the operation I had. Now, what I noticed and what I wrote about in the book is as I started hiring staff, at first I would hire them to come to work immediately because I need time. And so I'd say, come to work tomorrow or come to work next week. But then as I started hiring staff, and particularly chiefs of staff, and said, look, when do you want to leave the Hill? Well, I don't want to leave for 2 years. Okay, in 2 years I'll hire you. I hired them right then. The minute they knew they would come to work for me, their whole job changed. They were all, and they're human beings. I mean, if you have a job and you know you're going somewhere else, you're not going to, you're going to at least be thinking about the next job, and you don't want that business to go away. So what they do, unfortunately, and one of the real pernicious and corrupt parts of the system, and again, completely illegal, and unknown entirely. I mean, when I tell people this, they look at me and it's obvious when I say it, but until I do, they don't understand it, that the staffer becomes my staffer. So for 2 years, that staffer is not only my staffer, by the way, not only working like in my office, but it's better than my staffer because my staffers can't find the things that person's going to find and look out for our interests more than our interests, more than we could. And that's what I found was going on. And that's one of the reasons that we'll get to it, I'm sure, one of the prescriptions that I have is that those staffers can never become lobbyists. Right? So, but if you think about, what's striking about the problems you describe in the book is that they're completely unrelated, logically at least, to the actual crimes you were convicted of. So you're convicted of crimes. One of the, I think this is an innovation. You might want to be humble about it, but you had an interesting innovation of creating a firm with Mike Scanlon, whose job it was to recruit business leaders who might be affected by some particular legislation so that you could produce 5,000 very powerful people overnight who would call a congressperson and say, no, you can't possibly do this. And that was kind of, it's said to you, it's kind of Steve Jobs-ish kind of thing, where you look in retrospect and say, it's kind of obvious, why didn't everybody do this? But nobody was doing it. I mean, this was interesting. But you failed to disclose that you had a financial interest in that firm, and that was one of the things you were convicted of. You had tax evasion because you were diverting funds to charities, and you had you had an honest service fraud, which I guess there was a question whether after the Supreme Court case how that might play out. But what's striking is none of the problems you're talking about have anything to do with those particular crimes. So if you could be describing lobbyists who never crossed the line at all, and yet are producing all of the problems you're talking about. So
So it's not criminals here that you think are at the source of this problem.
There are very few criminals in this system. There are very few Randy Cunninghams and Bill Jeffersons and Jack Abramoffs. I just couldn't care where the line was. I just wanted to win, and so I just kept going. There aren't a lot of people like that. First of all, lobbyists are lazy too, for the most part, so they're not going to, that keeps them from becoming criminals, I guess, for better or for worse at times. But the problem that I try to focus people on is that it's not what's illegal. That's the problem. It's what is legal. That's the problem. The lines in the sand are so ridiculously drawn. One would actually have to ask oneself, well, why do you even need to go over those lines if they're so absurd? And that's a good question that I hope one day to answer to myself. But what's legal in this system is the problem. And that's where America's attention has got to be focused.
Okay, so what I want to do is outline the reforms you've described. And then I want to hire Jack Abramoff, the lobbyist, to war game those reforms. So imagine the reforms you described were enacted tomorrow. And now I want the really experts, and I want you to be on the legal side of this line this time, but I want a really expert lobbyist to help me figure out how I get around this reformed world. So the reforms you've described, key ones that I think are very interesting and important. Number one, you want to eliminate entirely any contribution by those lobbying the government or participating in federal contracts or otherwise financially benefiting from public funds. You don't want to limit it. Don't want to limit it. You want to eliminate it. Same thing with those who get perks from elected officials, whether it's a company or a union or association or a law firm. You shouldn't be able to give so much as $1, so zero. You can make a choice. You want to be a lobbyist? Then you can't get money. You want to give money? You can't be a lobbyist. Simple. You want to get money from the government? Get money from the government, but you can't give it. So that's one important category. Next, you want to eliminate the revolving door. Should you choose to serve in Congress or on the staff, you should be barred for life from working for any company, organization, or association which lobbies the federal government. So do your time and go home. And number three, you have a term limits proposal. You serve for 3 terms of 2 years, senators for 2 terms of 6 years. And number four, it's not clear how this relates, but it's fun. Repeal the 17th Amendment, which is the amendment that made senators elected, so that now we would have senators, I guess, the original form is they're appointed by the legislature. Maybe a better system would be appointed by the governor, but whatever. Repeal the 17th Amendment. All right, so that's now the reformed government.
Also, all laws need to apply to congressmen. Any of
Right.
Yeah.
That seems so obvious. That's, of course, all laws need to apply universally to everybody. And right now, Congress exempts itself. That's one of the issues that's been raised by this insider trading.
Right.
Yeah, okay. So we have those reforms. Congress has now passed that. Overwhelmingly, the president has signed it. Now I hire you, Jack Abramoff, to get my special interest legislation through the system. What do you do?
Well, you're hiring the Jack Abramoff who's not going to break the law.
Not going to break the law.
Okay,
No,
all right,
I
just
insist.
got to check which Jack Abramoff you're hiring. Our agency rents out different Jack Abramoff. In other words, your question is, what does a lobbyist do in a non-corrupt environment?
Well, in this environment, the question is whether there's still corruption possible.
Well,
I'm trying to get to what is the real problem.
Well, if money is removed from the system, so as a lobbyist, I have no ability to convey any money or any gratuity or anything that could cause gratitude on the part of the public servant toward me or my clients. Okay? If that has happened,
But you're not being creative with that, Jack.
how so?
All right, so you're right. You as a lobbyist can't come in and take credit.
Right?
But you can't tell me that Mike Scanlon and you couldn't put together a nice little operation which would effectively make it so that those rich people you otherwise would be lobbying for would be signaling in some
No, those rich people couldn't give money either under what I propose. Nobody who gets a benefit that the rest of us don't get can give any money.
So who are those 6 people in the United States who don't get some benefit from the federal government?
Me, you,
It's lots of benefits.
No, I don't mean benefit. When I say benefit, I don't mean Social Security.
Okay.
I'm talking about people going for grants and contracts and things like that. Basically, they're getting special favors. They are the special.
Okay, what about Wall Street?
Yes.
Wall Street can't lobby.
Yes.
They can't give
special attention to federal government or trying to achieve something with federal government is exempted from giving money, cannot give any money.
So then I ask again, who can give money?
Well,
Farmers, they can't get money.
people out there like I was before I was a lobbyist, who believe in certain congressmen, who believe in certain policies that are general policies. You know, let's say I was pro legalization of marijuana. Okay?
Let's say.
I'm not, but well, I probably am. I don't know. After prison, I probably am. I don't know. I haven't thought about that. Turn off these cameras. No, my children are watching. No, let's use that as an example. All right, I want to have Congress legalize marijuana. All right, or I want to have Congress ban abortion, or I want to have Congress do something in the general sense that applies to everybody. Doesn't apply to my company, doesn't apply to my industry, doesn't create a financial incentive for me. I haven't drafted, by the way, the legislation, and nor am I going to, of the legislation.
I just hired you. You got it.
Well, I was never a drafter. I had other people do that. I was the knucklehead who thought of how to talk to people. But it's the world that I'm trying to get to, and I think it's the world that you're trying to get to, and frankly, I think any reasonable person is getting to, is where, in essence, bribery is taken out of the system.
Okay, but again, so let's say Republicans want to cut the taxes on the very rich. The very rich not allowed to give money to the Republicans?
Well, see, I would say if somebody is trying to cut taxes across the board, that's a general interest.
Across the board?
Cutting taxes. Now, if the wealthy are also getting a tax cut there, I hope that's a general interest. We're going to disagree on certain of these things, because you're going to see in some things that I think special interests, I'm going to see in certain things special interests that you want. I guess, and again, I don't have, it's hard for me to drill into the details of this, because I didn't create my book in that way, and I should just maybe mention that how I came up with these things, these sort of bizarre, kind of suggestions that are the opposite of what I used to be. I came up with them walking the walking track in prison, while I started thinking, what if I were still a lobbyist? What are the kind of reforms that would I try to stop? What would I try to stop? Because the kind of reforms that they have now, reform is in Congress, I'll give you an idea. You can't buy a congressman a meal, all right? If they sit down and they use a fork and a knife, and they eat on a plate, that's a meal. You can't buy them that. But if they stand up and they use their fingers, that they can do. They consider that a reform. Okay, another reform. You can't buy somebody a $25 steak, or I guess in DC, a hamburger. Probably $25 hamburger. You can't buy them a hamburger. If you're a congressman, I can't go to lunch and have a hamburger with you and $25. But if I declare our lunch a fundraising event, and I pull out of my jacket $5,000 checks from PACs and hand it to you and say, hey, we're having a fundraising event, here you go, that's completely legal. In their minds, that's reform. So I was thinking, what are the kind of things I would go out of my way to stop, where I still a lobbyist, and that's where I came to for this stuff. But so putting aside the details of it for now, I mean, obviously, as you drill into these things, that's where they become difficult. All right, but there are plenty of great minds that can do it. I'm not one of them, but there are plenty of great minds who can with the will. If I were in a system where money was removed, where I couldn't give money, I couldn't buy them lunch, I couldn't take them to see the Washington Redskins, although I'm not sure that was ever a benefit to anybody to see the Redskins, but I couldn't take them to the football game, I couldn't take them out to play golf, I couldn't put them on an airplane travel, I couldn't do anything except what anybody could do if they walked in. At that point, all of my discussion becomes on the merits politically and philosophically for them.
Okay, so I have no disagreement about the effectiveness of that kind of narrow question about what lobbyists need to be allowed to gift or not gift or give, and even the idea of taking lobbyists out of the business of giving money. Charles Freed, on behalf of the ABA lobbying committee, came up with a proposal which was essentially the same here, which said that lobbyists should just not be in the business of raising money for people they are lobbying. So that much is fine. But I guess the question is whether that alone is enough. And the way you've made it more than that is it feels like you've opened this morass of trying to decide when I'm allowed to be giving, depending on whether the issue is really special interest to me or a general interest. So if it's taxing carried interest at the same rate that other capital gains are raise same income rate as opposed to a capital gains rate. Is that a special interest or is that a general interest? So it seems like it's a morass, and I just wonder whether an alternative, and you know where I'm going here because you've read the book, the alternative of thinking about a more creative funding system for elections wouldn't be as effective without being so restrictive on the freedom of people to participate in the political process. Because here you are, Jack Abramoff, a libertarian, telling all sorts of people they're not allowed to participate in the political process because they have a special interest here.
Right.
But the alternative would be, what if we funded elections with small contributions? My system, the Fair Elections Now Act system says basically you opt into a system where you get $100 from a citizen that's matched 4-to-1 by the government. I have a proposal of, I'll rebate you $50 of your taxes. You can use that as a voucher to give to people who only take the voucher plus $100. But it would be a system where all of the funding comes from small dollars. Mm-hmm. In that system, would we have to worry about whether the particular benefit that I might get from the government is a special interest or not?
I don't know. I mean, I'm open to that. I'm
open to that.
Yeah, I mean,
that's all we're finished now. Thank you very much.
Consider I think anything that gets the money out of the system, anything that removes the bribes, basically, is worth considering. There are philosophical issues of not as much with your thing, but people who are in favor of public financing of campaigns and things like that. But I think that the essential message that I'm trying to put forward is to stop the corruption. You've got to remove the money, because that's what I used when I was being corrupt, when I was doing that thing. So that is what does it. Okay. And so that's the deal.
Okay. Well, thank you. So we'd like to now invite people to participate through questions. And our strategy for questions is in all of our events, and we're going to adopt this rule here too, is that I will control the queue. We have 2 mics that go around, and so you signal to me that you want to be on the queue, and I will signal back to you that I see that you're on the queue, and you'll get the mic and then you'll speak. The mic will be delivered while the other question's being asked. So why don't we start here with Dennis?
Dennis Thompson. I once, several years ago, wrote a book called Ethics in Congress, which obviously had an enormous impact on Washington.
My favorite book. Yeah. Saw the movie, too.
We're waiting for the movie. Kevin Spacey was otherwise occupied. I guess this goes to something that Larry was touching on. Why should we pay attention to somebody who's convicted of a crime that has actually nothing much to do with the reforms that he's proposing? And we don't ask Barry Bonds about how to make baseball better. We might ask him about how to avoid the temptations of cheating and violating the law. And we might ask lobbyists like you how to actually get reforms through. Larry was hiring you, and said he ended up lobbying you for his proposal. But you didn't answer that. What you did was, in the book and tonight, list half a dozen proposals, which I'm not sure you're in the best position to suggest. I mean, I want to know what's the connection between your recommendations and your experience. And one recommendation that Larry didn't mention and you didn't mention, is a major one in the book, is that we should have a smaller government. Well, that sounds like the plank of a political party, and I'm not sure, again, how that follows exactly from your own experience. So could you tell us why your experience really has anything to do with the reforms that you're actually proposing?
I appreciate your question. I've been probably in 200 interviews since I got out of prison. That's the first time anybody asked that like that, so I appreciate you doing so. Look, I was in the middle of that world, and in terms of people ask me, how do we know you're sincere? How do we know you're You're telling us the truth. My response is, I'm not sure that it's important whether you know I'm sincere or not. I'm not here to run for president. I'm not here to win a popularity contest. I don't think with my name brand, I'm going to win any popularity contest anytime in the next century or so. But I do have experience, deep experience in this world, and I've been in rooms that a lot of people haven't been in. And I know what that world hates. And so once I had the benefit of a 2x4 cracking in the head and came a little bit to my senses in terms of the damage this world does, I'm somebody who I think has something to say about it in the sense that I've been there. Now, in terms of the smaller government part of it, there are 30,000 lobbyists, or whatever the number is. It seems every day it's different, 20,000, 30,000. Let's say it's 20,000 lobbyists walking around Washington, not because the government is the size it was in 1912. It's because the government is the size it is in 2011. And one of the frustrations that people have is that there's just too many people lobbying, there are too many special interests. I would posit, and I don't think it's, I don't know how one argues, that one of the reasons this is the case is the government's involved in a lot of things. And so when I say that the government needs to get out of a lot of this stuff, sure, I personally believe in having smaller government. I am not big on government to begin with. I had to go live with the government for about 3.5 years. It wasn't fun. And I believe, though, that that is consistent with wanting to get rid of the special interests, get the government out of some of this stuff, or devolve it to other places. What lobbyists want, by the way, and what I wanted, to some degree, when I was in there, is you want power concentrated. If you could have it, you would have one person making every decision, and then you just go lobby that person, and you make sure that that person's in your pocket. The more diffuse power is, the more difficult it is for lobbyists, and that's basically why I think that's important.
Yeah. Anyway, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Dictator.
My name is Erwin Shapiro, and I haven't written any book of relevance. I've written a book, but it's too technical to discuss. I have two questions, one very specific and one more general. The second of which you may have covered in your book, which I confess I haven't read. The first question is, seems to me there are three functions of a lobbyist, three weapons the lobbyist has. One is the bribe, two is the threat, and three is the fig leaf. What do I mean by the third? I mean giving the representative, senator, or whatever an excuse or a rationale to do the unreasonable, to pretend to be in favor of a certain bill because of some reason which is probably not valid. Do lobbying firms have special teams whose sole job is to develop the fig leaf or develop the cover story or what? Or is it just generic in any lobbying firm?
It's genetic in every lobbyist. I mean, it is, that's what lobbyists do. You want to give political cover to whoever you're asking a favor from. You want to make sure that they have the political cover necessary to get away with it, basically, to do it with a straight face and be able to explain it. And it's even something that's reasonable and good and wonderful, that always becomes part of the discussion with congressmen and with their staff. How can we do this in our district? We would constantly have, my view was 435 congressmen that all represent the entire country, because they're all sitting on different committees that have things to do with. So to me, it was nothing to go to a congressman from Ohio to help me out for something in Florida or something in Texas, as I did, in fact. Unfortunately, he also went to prison for this, but lobbyists don't view it that congressmen are just from their district, they're for everything. And so then one needs to craft, and lobbyists do, reasons why this is defensible at home, if you get asked. So it is part of every lobbying effort.
How would you foresee reforms like you suggested actually come into being? Have you got any master plan?
I didn't know that was important. Wait a minute. No, it's going to be difficult. Let's not kid ourselves. You're asking the very people who benefit from this lifestyle to get rid of this lifestyle. And ultimately, it's going to be a question of the media, exposing it like what 60 Minutes did with the insider trading scandal. I don't know how many people saw this, but until they did do that, nobody was thinking about that. You know, we kind of, when I was a lobbyist, kind of heard about members and staff. I own some restaurants, and they would come in sometimes and say, hey, you know, I just had a killing in, defense or something like that. You know, there's going to be a big bill, and I just bought a bunch of stock. Frankly, I thought they were knuckleheads. They're buying 100 shares or something, making $200. Who cares? You know, it didn't dawn on me, really. I didn't focus on what they were saying to me, which was they were insider trading, legally. So, but until the media starts talking about it, nobody's doing anything. Now, the bill went from 6 sponsors, I think, to 50-something sponsors in a couple weeks. So, if the American people, if the media continue to focus on this space, then there is more and more focus. And by the way, this is probably what accounts for the fact that Congress has an approval rating of under 10%. People look at the Congress and look at the government and they think, you guys are a bunch of jerks. You know, you're a bunch of blowhards who are getting rich on our dime, usually, and it's not fair, and so they ignore the system, or they get angry about the system, or they get out and occupy something, or they get out and have a tea party and go organize an election. But the more that happens on the left and on the right and in the middle, the more likely it is, I think, that something might happen.
Egon Chalakian. While at Harvard Law School in the early 70s, I hooked up with a gentleman by the name of Stanley Surrey. He was a professor here. He at that time introduced me to Wilbur Mills and Russell Wong. I became a tax analyst on Capitol Hill and joined committees. Years later, I ended up sitting on a board of directors in Los Angeles Beneficial Standard Corporation with Alfred Bloomingdale. Spent a lot of time with that clan, ended up on Reagan's kitchen cabinet. Knowing the players as I do in my memory at this point in time, did they have much of an impact on you? You came from that same neck of the woods, I gather. That's a culture by itself that has not been discussed tonight, but to ignore that culture, that was unique.
It didn't. My father was president of the Diners Club franchises when Bloomingdale was chairman, and I met Bloomingdale a couple of times, but I don't think he had a big influence on me, and frankly, I didn't meet any of the other kitchen cabinet guys until sort of the end of their lives when they were trying in the second term when I headed President Reagan's lobby. I met a few of them, but it didn't really impact me. What frankly shaped me more than anything was my experience at Brandeis University, the bastion of right-wing political activism. Okay. Right here.
Thank you, Mr. Abramoff. I imagine it was...
I'm sorry, you should introduce yourself.
Oh, James Williamson. I imagine it was fun to meet Alex Gibney as well, by the way. Here in Massachusetts, you mentioned lobbying, just once you mentioned lobbying at the state level, and of course here in Massachusetts we really don't have any problem with corruption there, except the occasional speaker of the House. Because of your background in lobbying around gambling, I'd be very interested to hear if you have any insights into, recently legislation was passed and signed in Massachusetts to authorize gambling, and there was some opposition to it, but it was roundly defeated. What should we have been looking for in the lobbying process here in Massachusetts, and what should we be looking for, what should we be alert to in the ongoing decisions that are going to be made about where the gambling is going to take place and who's going to get to profit from it? And how would we go about getting that information?
Well, gambling is all political, of course. Everything about the gambling industry is politics. And I spent a lot of my time stopping gambling when it was in the interest of my clients, who were casinos, to not have competition. And stopping, I don't know what happened here, to be honest with you, I haven't followed it, and I'm not even certain exactly what was transpired, but stopping gambling is easier than getting something through. So the fact that they got it through is remarkable. Generally it doesn't happen. So I'm sure there was a lot of money involved, obviously. These campaigns are not cheap. In terms of going forward, what do you need to be watching for? I think that probably to the degree you can, you want to try to get some legislation through, if it's doable, to prohibit anybody in that industry from giving any money politically, or they will own your state. They did this in New Jersey and they kept the casinos for years without having any real political power in the state other than as an employer. So to the degree that it's possible, if I were at this point trying to do something to control it, I would try to prohibit them from giving any money politically at any level, because even at the local level, giving to mayoral races and things like that, these companies can have a tremendous impact. And don't forget how much cash gets kicked out by a casino. And I don't know if you're talking about one casino or a bunch of 3 casinos in the Boston area, or
Three different regions around the state, if
yeah,
I've got it.
they're probably going to be very lucrative, and they're probably going to have some success, and if they're smart from the other side, if I were the casino, what I would do is use my money to consolidate political control, so that number one, it could never be undone, and number two, when I wanted to expand,
It's 12
the
o'clock.
grid, maybe the most important is to make sure there aren't 4 casinos. So,
We have a question right here.
So I'm Matt Beaver from the Divinity School. I haven't read the book, so could you talk a little bit about the conversion process, the sort of personal, reflective, self-inquiry kind of driven conversion process that you've gone through to sort of get to a place where you saw what you've done before is not so savory? And could you also say a word or two about what it's like to sort of be the object of so much shame and derision, and whether you hope that, and what your hopes are for whether that reputation will change over the course of your life?
well, I'd love to say that in the middle of my lobbying career, while I was making, boatloads of money, that it hit me all of a sudden that I shouldn't have been in that business. But I can't say that. It only hit me after I was out of that business. And I guess I'm maybe the kind of person who needed to have the entire house cave in on them before they realized that they were living in a house of cards. But that's what happened. And so with me, my end came rather suddenly. Within a period of a couple months, I went from everything was great to nothing was there. Everything was obliterated. And it probably took that, and then, by the way, and then it was 2 more years before I went to prison. So for 2 years, I sat and basically tried to work through what was going on. What did I do? First I had to ask myself, because when it started, I did have to be honest with you. I thought, what are they talking about? I didn't do anything wrong. I just did what everybody else does. I didn't innovate any of this. I just did more of it. Okay, so I had 72 seats at the Redskins Stadium, which unfortunately is what I had, as opposed to 4. Okay, so what's the difference? That's the first thoughts I had. Well, I should say, and that's not even the first thought. The first thought I had was, this will blow over. It's a little bump in the road. Won't be any problem. And when the first Washington Post article came out, and the essence of the article was that I charged a lot of money to my clients. That was no different than articles that had been on the front page of the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal about me that I put on our firm's website, all right, as advertising. So I look back now and, it's kind of morbid, but the email exchange between my firm and me after the first article was, should we put this up on the website? Is the picture okay? That kind of stupidity. We were just absolutely in a different universe. So at first I thought it would go away, and then it became clear it wasn't going away, and it was basically I was in denial. What did I do wrong? What's this all about? That didn't last long, by the way, because very quickly I was able to somehow objectively sit down and get outside of myself and look at what I was and look at what I was doing. And I don't want to say everything I did was wrong. It wasn't. First of all, certainly most of what I did was legal. But put that aside for a second. Most of what I did in life, I don't think was wrong or bad. But I was involved in areas that were bad. And it was those areas, and those were areas, by the way, I went to prison for. Things that I did go to prison for I was wrong about. And I regret all of this, of course. But it wasn't a matter of my saying, all right, well, let me look at exactly legally, what did I do wrong, what are the precise things, I'm going to be sorry about that, and everything else, to hell with you all. I didn't take that approach. I took the approach of, let me look at what morally I should have been doing. You know, the things I'd studied my whole life that I somehow separated. You know, I separated my religious and philosophical beliefs from my activities. And I'm not the first person to do that, obviously. Many people do that. But the fact that I did it, when I woke up to it, it was dreadful. It was horrific to me. And it was depressing. And I was in depression. You know, and there'd be mornings when, I never thought I wanted to kill myself, but I thought, gee, wouldn't it have been better if I wasn't ever here? And that's a horrible feeling. But I have a family. I have 5 kids and a wife who are also suffering, my mother and my father. My mother passed away, unfortunately, you know, through this. And so it was a horrific process, but it was a necessary process. And so by the time I got to prison, I had already reconstructed my belief system. I hadn't been able to speak about it because, first of all, the media weren't really interested in hearing me, to be honest with you. I became a cartoon. I put on a rain hat because it was raining one day when I went to go plea. I went to go to the courtroom. You know, you can idea what it's like for somebody who's in my circumstance. The media camp outside your house. You know, they accost your family. Wherever you go, they rush you. And the paparazzi and the media, and I call them paparazzi, the camera people, they're not like decent journalists, you know, Tom Brokaw, things like that. They're nasty. And what they want is for you to look at them. Because they want to get a picture of you looking at them. So they'll scream stuff at you that's unimaginable. Or they'll accost you physically. They'll make you walk into them. And eventually, by the way, I mean, I'm not as strong as I used to be, but I'm not completely weak. Finally, I just started walking right into them and knocking them over. You know, they were in the way. I didn't care. But that's kind of the sort of weird, horrible situation. And I became a cartoon, so I went to court. I wanted to avoid them when I was going to court. That was the big day for me to plea. And it was January. It was January 4th or something, 6th in D.C. And it was cold, it was raining, I got up early, I left my house in the dark. I wanted to get to court hours before my court appointment time because I wanted to beat the media in there. It was raining, so I grabbed the hat. Yeah, look, I'm an Orthodox Jew, we have hats. Okay, it's just sort of the deal. And so I put on this hat, and I put on this raincoat, and I left. And my wife was sleeping. She normally would look at me and say, what are you nuts? What are you wearing? You look like Boris Badenov or something like that. You know, and she was sleeping. And I went out, and I walked in, and I got in with none of the media there, and I had some other things on my mind that day. I was pleading guilty to crimes and going to face the fact that I would be taken away from my family. So we finished, and I was with the Justice Department and the FBI guys who, by the way, treated me very fairly and very appropriately, never abused me in any way. You know, I know that happens, but they didn't to me. And I put my hat on and my coat on to leave, thinking, all right, we're done. And I walk out, and the media starts screaming at me. You know, are you a gangster? Are you a mafia guy? And I'm looking, who are they talking to? Mafia guy, mobster dresses like this is George Raft. I mean, you know, mobster dressed like Tony Soprano. Who are they talking about? And it was me. And so I kind of, oh my God, I shouldn't have worn my hat and coat, I guess. And I became a cartoon. And so I couldn't talk to the media. I couldn't talk to anybody. But before I got to prison, this is what I was thinking. I was thinking, I'm part of a system. And I'm probably the razor's edge of a system that's destructive and really is against everything I'd always thought about for our country. And whether it was greed or whether it was just power or whether it was wanting to win or whatever it was, I shouldn't have been there. I shouldn't have been doing that. And I'm about to get punished, I know, before I went to prison. I knew I was going to prison. And when I went to prison, I didn't know how long I'd be in prison. And it wasn't until I was there 22 months that I even got my sentence. So I hope nobody in this room has been to prison. Prison's horrible. But every night in prison is terrible. But to be there and not know when you're leaving prison is indescribable. So finally I got sentenced, and I got more time than the Justice Department had even asked for. Okay, that's fine. And I went back and did my sentence. But when I was there, and after that, is when I started really thinking. And I started thinking, okay, it's not enough that I know I'm wrong. It's not enough that okay, I'm never going to do that again. Obviously, I'm not going to do that again. Who's going to hire me as a lobbyist? Imagine that meeting we got held. Congressman Jack Abramoff's here to see you. I mean, it's not going to happen. So I figure I got to go do something else, and I didn't want to stick my head out and become public. To be honest with you, it doesn't feel good to hear things about yourself like they said about me, and they still say it. But I guess you get some thick skin, but you really never get that thick a skin. And so I decided, this isn't what I should be doing. I shouldn't be hiding. I shouldn't go away. I should come back and try to do something about what I was doing. And in my head, I had experiences of that world that are unlike a lot of the people in our country. And most of the people who know what I know aren't going to talk about it because they're earning money with it right now, even tonight. And so I decided to go back in, and I've been attacked pretty severely, by the way, by my former world, not that I frankly care. But there are a lot of people who don't want to hear what I have to say. Not for the reasons that they think, oh, you're a criminal and you're a felon and who wants to hear from you. Okay, that I understand. People have that view. I understand that. But from the point of view of, shut up, Abramoff, go away and die. Get out of here. You're ruining it for the rest of us. Well, I don't consider myself part of that rest of us anymore. I consider myself part of the rest of us. Sorry for that.
We have a question over here.
Yeah, Jay Livingston. Probably the most pernicious special interest lobby in Washington, ironically enough, is the one that's probably closest to your own heart, which is the Israel lobby. Your own Capital Athletic Fund funneled $140,000 to illegal settlers militia for equipment and sniper training, even though it wasn't a charity that performed what it had stated that it was going to do. You recently also expressed great undying gratitude to your friend Tom DeLay for his defense of Israel throughout his many years. Why is it convicted felons and unscrupulous people like you and DeLay feel so close to the outlaw state of Israel? Is it that birds of a feather flock together?
I don't know. I like Ireland too. I don't know if that counts, but I like Ireland too. A lot of countries I like, but I don't know how to answer you. Obviously, we don't agree on Israel. What can I tell you? Look, I went to jail for misusing nonprofit money, and I'm sorry I did do it. But I'm an unabashed supporter of Israel, and well, they weren't settlers, but it's not. We're going to have to agree to disagree. Okay. We're here.
Hi, I'm Tom Ferguson. I was actually on NPR with you a couple of weeks ago on the program on insider trading. I teach at UMass Boston. I just want to ask you about the analytics of this. I mean, it's a very interesting discussion, but a lot of folks who tried to understand the logic of lobbying have had trouble trying to trace it through when they think about exactly how does a congressman or woman price the services they're doing. I ask because when you look at sort of what's paid and for what they get, you get some odd cases like maybe you might sell, I'm going to make it up, 6% of the defense budget one night for $200,000, and then a week later somebody will contribute $1 million and get just a gambling resort or something like that. I mean, could you shed some light on the process under what you might call I know you're a libertarian, so you must, in the traditional libertarianism in the United States, they love the price system. You must understand what my question's point is. I'd be quite grateful for any insight you could shed on that.
Well, I don't think there's a rational answer to the question. It's a good question. But my experience is that those members of Congress, which was most of them, who are into raising money and trying to not necessarily do what they would consider to be an illegal quid pro quo, but in essence a quid pro quo, they're just trying to get as much money for anything they do, no matter what it is. And so if $1 million is available, they're going to try to get $1 million. If $100,000 is available, they're going to try to do that. So I'm not certain that if I understood the question correctly, but I don't know that there's necessarily a rationale here. It's more of a Congress fears not being reelected and not advancing in the system and not being able to become a committee chairperson. And so money is the oil that makes that engine go, and they're going to try to get whatever they can get. So I don't know that there's necessarily a pricing system. There wasn't with us. I mean, so I'm unaware.
But let me push a little bit more on the question. It's a very good question. It's been, it's one of the puzzles at the center of whether money is actually corrupting the system. And one form of it is the price is so low. You in your book talk about the return on investment that you got from lobbying. You said your clients, you got them 80,000, I can't remember the number, some huge percentage return on investment. And the economists would say, well, how's that possible? Why doesn't the system just bid the price up so that the return is something like a market return? Like, why is it so irrational? Why doesn't the government hold out for more, right? So that they demand, that if I'm going to get $1 billion subsidy, which the sugar people get because of the tariffs, $1 billion subsidy, you should have to pay, you lobbyists, more than just, $1 million for that. You should be paying $500 million for that $1 billion subsidy. Why doesn't it work like that?
Because they're dealing in stolen goods.
Stolen goods.
Yeah, I mean, in essence, this isn't a normal business. They're dealing in stolen goods. They're taking things out of the public trust and selling them. So you're not going to get a lot of Duke Cunninghams with a price chart.
Too bad.
These guys, yeah.
Okay, Abby?
Hi, I'm Abby Brown. I'm a fellow at the center. I'm wondering if you can walk us through, presumably there are some idealists who get elected to Congress still, who go there with some public interest in mind. Can you walk us through how you go about corrupting them? What's the rhetoric of that conversation? How do you reel them in and so forth?
When a new member of Congress shows up in Washington these days, the first thing they meet is not the lobbyists. They meet their leadership. And their leadership introduces them to the lobbyists in the following way. They say that you're a new member of Congress, and the most important thing for you is to get reelected next time. Because if we lose your seat, then we're going to have to fight and get it back the time after that. So since that's the most important thing, and since most of them, 80% of them come with debt, the first thing we're going to have you do is you've got to retire your debt. And now we're talking about before the Congress is even convened. We're talking about in December, after the November election. And here's a group of people who are very good at helping you retire your debt. Meet the lobbyists. And that's where it starts. And even if they're the best folks in the world, and they have the greatest aims, and by the way, some of them will say, look, I have just no interest. I'm not going to take any lobbyists' money. I'm not going to get involved in that the first year, or maybe in the second year. But when they're there 20 years, even if they think I'm taking the campaign contribution, I'm going to take that $2,000, but I don't sell my vote for $2,000. They're wrong. They sell their vote for a glass of water, not consciously, but they're human beings. And if somebody does something for you, and you're a decent person, what is the thing you're going to think in your mind? Gee, that person did something nice for me. Now, you can either be a jerk and just say, I hate them. So if you do something nice for me, I hate you. And a lot of parents complain that sometimes kids act like that. Or you can be a decent person. Oh, gee, I can't give him with that, but I'm going to root for him. Or I can't do that, but maybe I can do this. That's how it starts. It is not a moment where somebody walks into Bob Ney and gives him $50,000 in casino chips. That is very rare. What I just described to you is virtually everybody. And it's just a matter of time before they are beholden to the lobbyists at one level or another.
Mr. Abrams, thank you very much for being here. My name is David Korn. I'm a professor of pathology at the medical school, the Harvard Medical School. There's probably a lot of agreement in this room, certainly, that the root of evil is the money, right? That's what you're saying. But if a miracle were to happen, and there was legislation passed, as some have been trying to do for a very long time, to make the system a publicly funded system and get rid of some of the temptation, don't you think that the Supreme Court would rule it a First Amendment violation and overturn the legislation? In other words, there seems to be a hopelessness about the road to a solution for a problem that a cause of which is very generally understood and accepted. How do you get rid of it?
Well, there's an interesting case in North Carolina right now that just the Fourth Circuit has affirmed, which bans lobbyist contributions in North Carolina. And it'll be very interesting to see where that goes. But somebody who chooses path A, you know, the rights aren't taken away. They're making a choice to engage in lobbying or engage in getting money out of the public till or whatever they're doing. For them to forego a right, we do have that in society. And it seems that that case in North Carolina may wind up being a seminal case in this regard. And it does bring hope that obviously if the Supreme Court knocks it down or says that that's not going to work, we're going to have to go back and look at other remedies. There are ways around the Supreme Court too. Okay, they're difficult. They're constitutional amendments, and they're they're impossible. When's the last time the Constitution was amended? I would venture to say most of the people in the room weren't born yet. So it's a difficult process, but I think that there is an opening here to go after it. We'll see what happens.
But David was asking about public funding, which you, for a moment, opened your eyes to, but then now you shut this down again.
Well,
I want to push you a little bit more on this because again, what you're talking about is limits, ways to limit people from participating. And you can't really, in the heart of your heart of hearts, believe. I mean, you might have a very accurate political judgment about the likelihood of public funding. But you can't, in your heart of hearts, really believe that if all we do is limit, the wealthiest 1% won't just find another way around the system to exert their influence inside the system, right? So,
Well, look, first of all, if things are drawn tightly, I can tell you I sat in prison with a bunch of guys who tried to work their way around the system, okay? And they were convicted and prosecuted and thrown in prison. So I don't want, if you've been to prison, you don't want anybody to ever go to prison. And I don't want to see people in prison. But if that's the penalty for playing games, you're going to get rid of a lot of it there too. But let me tell you why I'm against public funding, among other reasons. First of all, I am a conservative. I am a libertarian type conservative. So
who wants to silence a bunch of speakers?
Well, I mean, I want to silence if they make a choice. I'm giving them the choice. Nobody's forcing anybody to be a lobbyist. I wasn't forced to be a lobbyist. And if people make a choice, I think that they, like in all things in life, you give up certain things if you choose other things. But in terms of public funding, look, I have a distrust of the government. I have to be honest with you. And needless to say, I have a distrust of the government for what I've been through just in the last period of time. They say that a conservative is a liberal who is mugged. Well, a libertarian is a conservative who was indicted. Okay, and so I lived in complete government control, so maybe that does influence my thinking a little more than others. I don't, and I'm not trying to disparage everybody who works for the government, surely not. But generally, I don't like the idea of putting in the hands of people power to make decisions.
Right, okay, but then vouchers don't do that.
Okay, yeah, I said the voucher thing, actually, I was much more open to in terms of, from my own philosophical point of view. When I read your book, I thought that was a much more, the Grant and Franklin approach, that would be something much more, personally as a conservative, much more amenable to. And I think it's very important, we talked briefly before, to get this stuff fixed, we're going to have to find something that people on the right and people on the left are going to be able to agree to, and to overcome the kind of bitter political divide that's in this country. It's something that both sides can get a hold of, and I think that might be one way to do it.
Thank you. So I'm Jeff Bridges. I'm a student at the Divinity School. Before I was there, though, I worked in politics for about 10 years, and it really just completely sucked my soul dry. And I think you understand. And so coming here and going to Divinity School, and I got involved with Occupy Harvard, and it's really been a redemptive experience for me. And I came here tonight thinking, oh, this is Jack Abramoff, he's writing a book to make money, and now he's trying to sell it to Harvard students. Naturally, that's just what the guy's doing. That's what you do. You write a book. Something bad happens, you write a book. But then when you were talking about your experience of being arrested and reflecting on how you operated as a lobbyist, it really spoke to me, and I believe you, I buy it. I want to know why you're doing what you're doing right now. What do you hope to accomplish with the path you've chosen now?
Well, I mean, as I said, what I want to do is I've got some role to play in solving this problem. It's a problem. I've come to recognize it as a problem. I mean, you all recognize it intuitively. I'm ashamed that I didn't, but I did. And not only didn't I recognize it, I was in it. And not only was I in it, I might have led it. But okay, that was pre-lapse ceremony at this point. So what I'm doing now is as hard as it is, by the way, it's not easy to sit here and say the things I'm saying to you all. I mean, you know, it's just not. And you're not the only ones I'm saying it to. And I've said it in front of big TV audiences. And I gotta believe in the heart of hearts, my family probably wishes I wouldn't say it, although they've been nothing but encouraging, because they also see that this is not a system. Look, none of my kids, you know, I was very political. My wife worked for the Republican National Committee. We were both political junkies. Not one of my children, is joining the college Republicans, but not one of my kids wants anything to do with American politics. Not just because of what happened to us, because it's just utterly hopeless. They think it's utterly hopeless more than. So I think just even for them, I want to do something to try to move the ball forward. I'm not going to do it by myself. Frankly, I wish I were back in the position. I wish I came to this while I was where I was. You know, when I sat in prison, you know, when you're in prison, all you're thinking about is, how do I get out of here? How do I get out of here? Even an hour earlier, just please, God, get me out of here. It's just impossible to describe what it's like. 24 hours a day, people screaming. You know, we lived 6 men to a 150 square foot space. It's just a nightmare. So you're thinking every minute, how do I get out of here? So what was I thinking? Of course, I was thinking, darn, why didn't I think of this when I was a lobbyist? I could have had the laws changed and figured some way to have gotten me out of here if this had happened. Well, obviously, that's silly. But I do often sit back and think, you know, what if I still was in that game? Boy, I could really do some damage if I was in there and it occurred to me what has occurred to me since. Obviously, I'm not there and I can't. So what I can do is I can speak about it and I can tell people what went on. And I wrote about it. And, you know, I have a book out. I have a $44 million restitution order. This book would have to outsell the Bible for me to see any, you know, any money. And I didn't do it to make money. And the industry anyway, as everybody who writes books knows, you know, is in terrible shape. You know, people aren't making, unless you're, you know, Rollins or whoever, not making a lot of money. I did it because I think it's vital people know. And if they know, maybe they'll get angry. And if they get angry, maybe they'll do something. And maybe this great country, and it is a great country, and a great people will rise up and try to get something changed. That's my view.
So we have the last question. So make it really, really good.
My name is Howard Melman. You were saying before when your story broke, how you were in denial and you were just in a different world. And I immediately wondered, do you think that politicians and staffers are equally in denial and in that different world?
Yes, they're absolutely. Not only are they not recognizing what has now become clear to me and has been clear to all of you from the beginning, but think about folks who can go around trading on insider information and buying stock on the one hand, and then reading the paper that Roger Rotman gets sent away for 11 years, and they're doing exactly the same thing, if not worse, than he did. And they not only don't feel bad about it, they feel good about it. So, and they don't understand. And these same guys, and by the way, I do talk to congressmen still. They're quiet about it. Obviously, no congressman wants it in the paper. They're talking to me. And they don't get it. Why is it that we're so unpopular? Why is it that 9% approval rating? How is that possible that Obama has a better approval rating than we do? Are you kidding? Are you kidding? That's the world they're in. They don't live in, unfortunately, they totally disassociate themselves from a reality that everybody else intuitively sees. And by the way, as did I in those days. So I understand it, and I feel bad for them in a certain respect. You know.
So Jack Abramoff, thank you for coming. So you're going to go downstairs. Okay. Great.
Coming up next on C-SPAN, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas speaks at his hometown of Pinpoint, Georgia. Then the Washington Post presents its Top American Leaders Awards,